Today we're going to talk about this really interesting topic that I've been wanting to explore. I'll set up the stage for you. There's really two schools of thought when it comes to manifestation. The first school is that if we believe in what we want to accomplish, specifically if we believe that it exists, that it can happen. This is the traditional sense of manifestation or visualization. A lot of people talk about this. Eckhart Tolle talks about this all the time. He says that the one principle that's common to every single text out there when discussing manifestation is that we need to believe that it exists before it exists, before we have it. And by doing so, we can open up our neurons in our mind to be able to receive whatever that thing is. So the classic example is that if you want to become a millionaire, you have to believe that you're a millionaire. You have to act like you're a millionaire. And that doesn't mean you're just spending money like a millionaire. That means you have the mindset of a millionaire. And if you speak to very successful people, they will agree. There is absolute truth in this idea that manifestation is critical to accomplishing our goals. Now, there's this one thing that I think is really interesting, is that if you speak to some people who are hyper successful, they talk about brute force motivation. They talk about perseverance at a level that is unlike 99.999% of the population. I had a chance to meet a billionaire. His name is Rami El-Batrawi. I went to his house up in the Hollywood Hills, and it was interesting in speaking to him because he embodies the idea of that opulent kind of tycoon billionaire. He has a jet, multiple mansions, fancy cars, homes all over the place, investments, he owns hotels, check, 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 check. But there's one thing that's very interesting about him that I noticed, which is that manifestation is one of the aspects of his success. I like to call it Meta-Moxie. So meta as in large, big, massive, and then Moxie. I think Moxie back in the day was like a cream soda that you could buy in New England. And it became this sort of term, he's got Moxie, which basically means motivation. I'm going to call this Meta-Moxie because I couldn't find the right word for it. Is it perseverance or motivation? So we're calling it Meta-Moxie today. What Rami had, which was so interesting, is the idea that it was manifestation plus Meta-Moxie. In fact, he ran away from home at the age of 12 years old because he knew he wanted to be successful. He wanted to go from Canada to New York, and he wanted to start to build businesses. So he lived in his car for years, and sure enough, he became a millionaire and then eventually a multimillionaire after having lost all of his wealth. And then another complete and total loss in the form of a bankruptcy. He's now a billionaire on the Forbes 400 up-and-comer list. The classic example that I like to share. It's a great story. It's about Meta-Moxie. This is a story about someone that was incarcerated overseas for a crime that they did not commit. And this was a developing nation. There was very little litigation laws, protection for immigrants when it came to doing crimes, or at least a crime that maybe the person didn't even commit. This person ended up having to go to court, get imprisoned. I think the sentence was like 7 years. And the type of prison that he was going to be sentenced to was a prison where everyone was sleeping on the floor. There's cockroaches. National Geographic does a show on this. I think it's called Imprisoned Abroad or something. It's a really interesting show. But this was actually one of the stories on that show. And the saddest part about it is that they actually allow the inmates to smoke crack or whatever it is that they're doing inside the prison cell because it's unlivable. You'll basically go insane. So he had decided to escape from prison, which sounds like an impossible feat, but he made up the goal that he was going to do that. Now, this is an example of Meta-Moxie. This is not an example of manifestation. I mean, if he sat there in his prison cell and did a meditation and said, I'm going to manifest my freedom, my exit from this terrible place, it probably would not have happened. He needed to believe in it and manifest it, but then he also needed absolute brute force. Now, this brute force turned into that scene from Shawshank Redemption. It's the classic scene behind the poster, and he was digging away and chipping away for years and years and years, and then eventually built a hole long enough to get to the creek and escape. A very similar story. That is my example of Meta-Moxie. So when we think about manifestation versus Meta-Moxie, one of the things that we have to talk about is neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the ability of the nervous system to change its activity in response to intrinsic and extrinsic stimuli by reorganizing its structure, functions, connections. In this case, it's after injuries, but it doesn't have to be after an injury. The classic saying that I always love to share is the neurons that fire together wire together. And this is just basically an elegant way of saying that if we believe something, that we are changing the structure of our mind so that our actions and our reactions to life manifest that, they make that possible. So if I tell myself I am the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, I will make decisions accordingly. I don't mean that in an irresponsible way. I don't mean overspending and biting off more that you can chew. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is making big decisions so that we can manifest ultimately what that goal is. So neuroplasticity is a big part if you actually uncover the neuroscience of manifestation, and in this case, Meta-Moxie. So I encourage you guys to do some research on neuroplasticity because it's such an exciting field in neuropsychology right now, and really in just life. Everyone's talking about it. It's absolutely interesting. There's another story that I wanted to share. At my martial arts studio where I practice Jeet Kune Do, I met a karate instructor who's a black belt in a specific type of karate, and a very niche one that I hadn't heard of. And his sensei actually had an injury. He broke his neck. And his sensei was a massive proponent, massive believer in manifestation. And he told his student, I'm going to cure myself. I need massive amounts of therapy, and which is Meta-Moxie, and massive amounts of manifestation. So he spent months and months and eventually years healing himself from a broken neck. Still some remnant pain, still some remnant issues, but the doctor said that he would not have a healthy neck. In fact, the doctor said you would not be able to even do martial arts, let alone any type of physical activity. Through that manifestation and that Meta-Moxie, our sensei got to a better place. Now, here's the crazy part. Someone might say, okay, well, who knows? It might have been a fluke. It might have been a special circumstance. What's really interesting is that sometime later, he broke his back, which is terrible. And this was from some sort of a very, very strange accident that happened, apparently. And in breaking his back, he said the same thing. He said, I'm going to heal myself. I'm going to use manifestation, and I'm going to use Meta-Moxie. And sure enough, years later, he's still walking. He's doing martial arts. It's almost like you wouldn't know. So if we combine manifestation with Meta-Moxie and wrap this all up in the essence of, I have a goal, I want to accomplish my goals, and I believe in the idea, I believe in the science of neuroplasticity, we can actually accomplish that goal, which I think is a really special thing. And I know this for a fact because when I went through the process, now my story is not as detrimental, but I remember when I broke my hip. I broke my hip it smack dab in the pandemic, and it was a bad crack right on the femoral neck. It was a terrible experience. And I remember saying to myself, I am going to cure myself. I'm going to need to do whatever I need to do to cure myself. And I remember being post-op in the hospital, and they actually gave me fentanyl or oxycodone. It was one of those drugs that just absolutely puts you out. I don't recall which one it was. And I was in an absolute daze, all alone in my room, no visitors, and it completely muted my mind. And I had promised myself that I would not take something like that ever again because I had zero control of my ability to heal myself. And after I said, I am going to have to heal this hip in a way that is timely, responsible, in a way that's very, very natural. Now, anyone can heal a broken hip. It's a very common injury, actually. It's a very common type of break, especially for athletes. But I remember going through the process, and I think the thing that I can take away from it most was the ability to stay positive, the ability to not let being on crutches, being on a walker, slithering around like a snake up the staircase. It was really, really funny, actually. I remember having this positive mindset rooted in healing. I was able to get myself to a point where I was doing exercise, I was able to walk, I was able to do just pretty much anything that I wanted to do within 6 months. And I think that that's average, but really this is about the mindset. So if we have a positive mindset, we can endure less suffering because we all know that life is filled with suffering. That's what life is about. And our journey in life is figuring out ways to overcome this suffering. The other thing that I think that's really important to talk about here is this idea of the growth mindset. So Dr. Carol Dweck out of Stanford, she coined the term growth mindset. And the opposite of a growth mindset, of course, is the scarcity mindset. So when we think about growth mindset, we're talking about the same stuff here. We're talking about manifestation. We're talking about Meta-Moxie, rooted in massive amounts of motivation, perseverance, super hard work, okay, what we used to call hustle. I don't know if people use that term anymore. It's about hard work, but really it's about the mindset. So I encourage you to do some research on the growth mindset versus the scarcity mindset, because it's like palpable. People that embody the growth mindset, you can feel it, you can see it, you can hear it. It's just a sense of essence that they have, where everything is rooted in growth. They delegate, they figure out ways to think big, they figure out ways to surround themselves with the most successful people. They don't waste their time on things that don't really produce results for them. At the same time, they also have an abundance mindset when it comes to love and family. The growth mindset is not the proverbial CEO that works until 10 o'clock every night for 60 years and then passes away from a heart attack. That's not the growth mindset. The growth mindset is there is abundance of resources, there is abundance of love, and there is abundance of basically anything that I want. So I think it's important to talk about the growth mindset when we talk about this. The other thing that I think is really relevant here is the self-fulfilled prophecy. I mean, I remember seeing the movie The Secret, and that was a very poignant film. Not new information. Okay, that information dates back to thousands of years. If you go back to some of the most original texts, they talk about the secret is believing in yourself, manifestation, visualization. These things are absolutely paramount when it comes to goal setting and accomplishing those goals. So I think that a self-fulfilled prophecy it's basically a different way to say manifestation, okay? But the only thing that's missing, in my opinion, is that Meta-Moxie. That placebo effect that we are basically giving ourselves, it used to be called fake it until you make it. And people used to use that term a lot, fake it until you make it. And a lot of people, it has a negative connotation to it, because when you think about someone that's faking it until you make it, you think about someone that's basically being an imposter. They're a fake, right? That's not what they are. That car that they're driving, the clothes that they're wearing, what it says on their business card, the words that are coming out of their mouth, it's like bogus. And I remember speaking to someone that I was doing music with. He said something which resonated with me. He says, I'm going to speak it into existence. And that's what he said. And I remember hearing that, and I said, you know what? That sounds way better than fake it until you make it. And then years later, there was another sort of manifestation of this, which is be real, but think big. So when you combine this idea of being authentic, speaking things into existence, manifesting your goals, it's unbelievable what we can accomplish. Thank you for watching this video. Can't wait to see you at the next one.